become clearer and clearer. Let me draw an outline about what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to deliver a quick introduction about TCP/IP and some parameters which are really important in this experiment. I'm going to talk to you about how this experiment started and about the experiment setup. Then about the things we discovered, basically the protocol patterns, and I'm going to talk to you about the most important ones which we found. Of course, about the drawbacks and pitfalls which we encountered, which kind of influenced the results, as you will see. And of course, a bit of a conclusion, future work, and how this experiment may help the industry. Now, as you read the title of the presentation, it all comes into your mind the next question: in how many ways can you actually send an email message? Of course, all SMTP senders respect the same principle, or more or less strictly, but they all behave differently. Well, the differences actually show up at the connection level, and as you're about to see, the TCP/IP transmission can say a lot about the sender if you know where to look. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about the TCP/IP protocol. Of course, you all know that the TCP/IP protocol is the foundation of reliable, ordered, and error-checked delivery of data over networks. Now, what you might not know is that the TCP/IP protocol is one of the most popular cases of the RAS syndrome. You guys know what the RAS syndrome is? No? Anyone? You know, of course. The RAS syndrome is the redundant acronym syndrome. Most notable cases of this are ATM machine, LCD display, and PIN number. So please, henceforth, please correct me if I ever say TCP/IP protocol, or if you hear anyone saying TCP/IP protocol. Grammar Nazi, thank you. Okay, in a nutshell, very small nutshell, how TCP/IP works is the application sends a big chunk of data. The TCP layer is responsible for breaking it into small chunks of data and personalizing them with a beautiful, I think, I'm not sure about the colors, I'm very colorblind, sorry, with TCP headers, each of these becoming a TCP segment, and of course passing each of them to the IP layer, which in turn adds its own beautifully colored IP header, creating an IP datagram. I'm sorry if any of you guys are colorblind, I'm too, so it's okay. Good. Okay, looking at a single chunk of data, there is a very important parameter relevant to our experiment, which is the maximum segment size. Now, this maximum segment size has to be carefully chosen because if it is too small, you can create overhead. There's no point in sending small chunks of data if you can send bigger ones, if the network supports it. Now, if it's too large and the network does not support it, the IP layer will generate fragmentation, and this is not a desirable thing. Of course, I forgot to mention what the maximum segment size is. The maximum segment size, as we'll refer to as MSS, is the largest amount of payload data specified in bytes that TCP is willing to receive in a single segment. Although it is specified at connection time, and it's established at connection time, the maximum segment size can be adjusted dynamically due to network conditions. If the network conditions allow it, it will get bigger, and if the network conditions are poor, it will get smaller as to accommodate the two impediments, overhead and IP fragmentation. Okay, moving on, I want to talk to you a little bit about how this experiment came to life, and to cut it short, it came to life by mistake. We were fine-tuning, debugging our SMTP servers written in Node.js, and we started selectively logging some TCP segments in order to improve something. And well, we went through the 4 stages of discovery as I like to point them out. Of course, the first stage of discovery is, wait, what? We simply got a lucky grab through like gigabytes of logs, and we discovered by mistake a pattern which I will talk to you about in a couple of minutes. And we were, the next stage of discovery. We kind of noticed that and started looking for it. And of course, we noticed a recurring pattern. We figured out, hey, this connection pattern may be connected somehow with a spam bot, for example, through the way spam bots send messages. And of course, the next stage of discovery was, whoa, okay. We started inferring similar patterns by, we know a lot about how spam is sent by bots. We know about the templates they use and a whole lot of that. And we kind of started inferring those templates, and we started looking for them. And we kind of got a confirmation about most of them through searching through our data. And of course, the last stage of discovery, of course, publish a paper to VB 2014. Okay. Sorry. Let's talk a bit about the setup of our experiment. Now, there were actually 2 stages of the experiment. One was the purpose of the first stage was to better understand how TCP/IP and MSS work, and for that we created a TCP/IP server located in the East Coast in the US, and the client was hosted back home at Bitdefender HQ in Romania. And for the actual experiment, we, in order to analyze and extract protocol patterns, we created a better Node.js SMTP server, and we pointed the spam trap domains toward it, and we let the spam flow. Now, about the first stage of the experiment, let's look at how TCP behaves under certain conditions. The first experiment is a pretty straightforward. The client wants to write a 5 kilobyte buffer to the server. Now, this scenario we repeated at well-delimited intervals so that the writings do not overlap. And what we discovered is the packages, the data was split into segments sort of like this. If you can see, those rectangles represent actual segments, and those are with the size of 1440, which is pretty common MSS for a decent internet connection. Okay, there were 3 of packages of full size and the remainder of 800. Sometimes, when TCP got courageous, due to network connection which was good, raised the MSS to a multiple of 1440, and maybe sometimes it drove back to the base MSS. Sometimes it started low, but it went courageous at the end. Okay, what is important is like the segments all feature sizes which are multiple of the base MSS. Okay, now on to experiment number 2, which features 2 sequential writes, no time between them, and the scenario is obviously repeated at well-delimited intervals so that the write calls do not overlap. And we noticed 2 patterns of sending, but the first one is clear delimitation in the 2 made by TCP between the two writings. The first 3 blocks represent the first 5K, and the other 4 blocks represent the next 5K. This occurred with a probability of 30%. And the next pattern is obviously TCP decided to cache the 2 writes and merge them all together, and of course choose whatever MSS they wish for the transmission, depending on the network conditions. Now, The next experiment is pretty similar to experiment number 2, but there's a twist. Between the two right, there is a 100 millisecond timeout. Now, in this case, all of the patterns are definitely delimited. So TCP sends clearly two sequences. There's no caching between these two writes. This is a very important observation because, as we will come and see, it will say a lot about how the bots send spam. Okay, now let's get to the core of it. Let's describe a bit. Let's describe some SMTP patterns. We kind of group them into more categories. First category was obviously official MTAs like PostFix, whatever, QMail or stuff. The next category was SMTP relay servers, which is pretty similar to the first one, but it has a twist. And clients which adjust the message on the fly. Basically, here are included the bots and so on. And of course, other interesting types, which I will talk to you about. Okay, on to official MTAs. Now, persistence is one of the primary objectives when designing email as a server, amongst many other objectives. Now, persistence leads the software to often write emails to the disk before actually sending them. And of course, one of the other objectives is to prepare the server for congested environments. You know, in big traffic, you have to handle a lot of messages. So basically, as a result of that, to keep resources under control, resource consumption under control, you have to minimize syscalls, for example. And this is a thing we inferred and we tested, and we decided that the result was that lots of official MTAs transmit messages in a single write call, similar to TCP behavior number 1 we talked about. In a single write call, leaving the layers, the below layers, to perform the splitting of data in the manner which they find suitable. The pattern shows like this for an official MTA. You're going to see a lot of those. Basically, on the left column, you're going to see some rectangles which represent the package and the package size. And to the right, sometimes it's important, the contents of the package. So basically, for an official MTA, it looks like this. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty smooth up until the end. So you can see that the pattern is the packages are sizes, multiples of the base MSS. So yeah, we inferred that the MTAs use a single write call to output the data to the socket. Now, SMTP servers, as I said, are pretty similar to official MTAs, but they have a twist. If I haven't configured some SMTP relay server, but I think most of them, what I actually do in addition is to add a receive header at the top of the message. So basically, we notice that, and we kind of notice that the received header is in its own write call. So the pattern will look like this. The first chunk of data is 77 bytes and represents strictly the received header. And then, moving on is like a standard MTA ending with a reminder. Now, on to the cool stuff, because servers are, sorry. The next category is spam bots. Now, we noticed some patterns which were pretty obviously indicating that the message was generated from a template. Well, basically that's what spam bots do. They adjust the messages on the fly, and the correlation in our head was pretty straightforward, and we kind of got to this. Okay, the first example of spam bots pattern we noticed was with the headers in a distinct TCP sequence, basically indicating that the headers were probably forged, and then after the first write call sending the headers, the rest of the contents was sent. The pattern looks like this. As you can see, the first chunk contains only the received, and no, not only the received, only the headers. And moving on, the rest of the message. Interestingly enough, a lot of bots seem to send this protocol ending sequence. As you can see it, the last frame, sends it to its own write call. This is pretty interesting, we thought, and we discovered a lot of patterns having this. I'm not sure if any official, I'm pretty sure actually, that no official FTA sends the protocol ending sequence in its own write call. Okay. Another pattern related to bots was actually the pattern that I was talking to you about, upon which we stumbled at the beginning of the study. This contains a clearly delimited custom-tailored header in a distinct TCP sequence. Now, for example, the subject or the from or other headers. This is a typical template filling behavior for a spam bot, and it looks like this. The first chunk is conveniently ends at the subject line. If you notice, the subject line is on its own line, and then, of course, the rest of the headers, including the from. Sometimes we got templates, we got patterns using the from as a distinct sequence, and then going on with the rest of the message. This was pretty awesome to discover, and I think that was the thing which started it all. Now, a pattern not related to bots, which we discovered, and we call garage SMTP servers. Now, why do we call them that? We will find out in a moment. What their characteristics are is the TCP segments are pretty uniform, just like all MTAs. So it was pretty good to assume that it was also an SMTP server. However, they have very small MSS values, which is consistent and does not fluctuate. Now, this looks like this. Pattern looks like this. It's pretty consistent, as you can see. 920 is a pretty small MSS for a email server. So that is why we came to think about why would an email server have such a low tier internet connection? Maybe it has a low reputation. If you have a great email server, you maybe want to assure it has a good internet connection, or maybe it's a home user hosting a server. Anyway, stuff like that really puts the reputation of the IP under question. Now, moving on to some cool stuff, we discover some patterns featuring very fluctuating MSS and frequently dropping to minimal values. We immediately associated those with connections from older, maybe cellular networks, and we started looking into it. And of course, we were surprised to see what we found. The patterns look like this. So the first segment is courageous, and then the MSS drops to the lowest value of MSS possible, that is 536. And it goes on like this, and in some cases, the size would go up again, but not all. Now, of course, we started to wonder why are spam messages coming from a cellular phone. We started, are we really dealing with mobile bots? We could not let that go without further investigation, of course. And we started looking up, collecting the IPs from which these messages came from. And surprisingly, 90% of IP addresses in those patterns belong to cellular networks. And we were surprised to find out classes of IPs from Peru, and the biggest one was from Turkey. Actually, the way bigger one was from Turkey. Of course, this is subject to further investigation. We're actually looking into it right now. Okay, so now for some funny stuff. We noticed some distinct sequences. It was like it was like the software was trying to write in sequences of multiples of 1024, notably 2048 and 8192. And of course, immediately we thought, oh my God, we have a obsessed guy with the 2048 game. Okay. I'm not presenting. This has a purpose because I want to talk to you about how fragmentation can affect our study. So the patterns looks like this. The first chunk is 1460, which is a decent MSS. The next is 588, and so on. Now, at first we thought, really, this is just fragmentation, but high fragmentation usually triggers a mitigation from the TCP layer, which usually immediately triggers an adjustment of MSS to avoid fragmentation. This does not look like mitigation because, as you can see, it's repeating. So we started adding things up, and we discovered that these two actually make up 2048, and it's a pretty decent pattern to look. Now, to reach a conclusion, I want to talk to you a bit about the pitfalls of this method and how they affected our research, and they still do, and to give you some numbers about statistics, of course, about how can this research help current industry and further on. Now, the pitfalls, of course, come in the following chain. If you have network congestion, basically what happens is packet fragmentation, and which leads to a mitigation reaction by TCP in order to reduce those, and usually the MSS is adjusted to mitigate. Now, this mitigation reaction generates a lot of apparent white noise in our data collection, and it was pretty tough to overcome this. Let me give you an example of a pattern. This is the transmission starts with a message of 3088, then there's a package of 72, and then again 1388. Now, of course, if you look at this, it's pretty similar to the pattern I described with the custom header in its own, for example, the subject line in its own sequence. We stumbled upon this, and we actually had to look at these 72, the packages of 72, and realized there was no subject line there. And we started doing the math, and what really happened in this example was that the first TCP tried to send the first chunk with an MSS of 1460, but failed to do so, and it triggered a mitigation reaction, and the MSS dropped to 1388. To get past this, what we did was to heuristically determine the most probable MSS values But this is very tricky because we came up with numerous problems with this. So yeah, this is a very big pitfall for the study. Now, we started counting those just to have a good picture about how we stand at the moment. I'm pretty sure we will improve this. But we kind of counted the pattern occurrence in our spam flow, and it was like 1 million messages spanned over 2 days. We had to actually sample the spam flow because we receive a lot more than 1 million messages per day. We had to sample that, and that is also an issue. And of course, another issue affecting these numbers is definitely that the spam waves fluctuate. There is a possibility that in a day, spam wave consisting of a lot of 1 million messages influencing your numbers. Okay, so this is the pattern with the headers first is like 2% of what we found. The pattern consisting of custom headers, for example, subject or from, is close to 1%. The patterns featuring the protocol sequence in its own distinct segment is 1.17%. The mobile IPs we discovered are close to 0.5%, and the 2048 for fan club is also close to 0.43. Now, this may not seem much, but think about the detection rates that products have in the VB spam test. I don't think that there are many products which feature detection rates below 99.5%. If we gamble with these percents in such a small detail, now this percent may be quite of interest. Now, how does this research help? There is a product suited for PostFix. It is called PostScreen, and what it does is sits in front of PostFix and performs heuristic connection level rules to filter out spam. Now, I'm sure that when we sort all this out, we will be able to implement such connection level heuristics in PostScreen and maybe in our product also. How it helps further is to better detect botnets, to add to the existing means of detecting botnets. Of course, to evaluate server and IP reputation, and also improving our image about threats coming from mobile devices. And of course, I want to hear maybe other ideas from you guys in the questions and maybe in the cafe after. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. Do we have any questions?
Please.
Right there.
Thank you, Alex. That was really good. Imagine you're a spammer and you're in this room and you're reading this and think, oh dear, they detect at least 5–6% of my spam. How hard do you think it would be for a spammer to put something in front of their SMTP sending service to smoothen out the packet size, if you understand what I mean?
Yeah. When it comes to bots, really, I don't think they can afford much because they have to stay stealthy. But yeah, that's a very good question. I'm pretty sure it will stay this way for a while because the way bots are implemented. I mean, it's a very good question, yeah.
Thank you, and I would probably agree with you.
Yeah, definitely after publishing this paper, some of the bot writers will think, oh my god, what have I done? Let me rewrite this and call a single write call. Yeah. But it's pretty interesting to check that out. Yeah.
Good. Any other questions? In the back.
Is the Is the plan at this level to use the connection detections to drop the spam at the connection level, or would you
Of course.
possibly be adding artifacts into the header that could be consumed by an upstream anti-spam layer as a part of their calculation of spam
Well,
heavy?
yeah, at first I imagined that it would be just, I don't know, a thing which will add to computing the overall score for spam. I'm not sure if we can trust this at the moment. We have not reached a stage in which we say, okay, I can definitely say that if the message respects this pattern, it's definitely spam. It's not trustworthy yet, but it can definitely say something about reputation of the IP, about the spam message. So not yet. It's not trustworthy to use at the connection level, but when it will be, definitely
Yeah, that's what
make a
I
pretty
figured.
good improvement. Yeah.
If you could take it into the calculation of the rest of the stuff, then, and if you reflected it internally, it could possibly be used as an implication of compromise, maybe not an indicator of compromise, but an implication
Yeah.
for internal network monitoring too.
All right, thank you, Alex.